Hey, Eric. We're
Hey,
live.
Justin. How
Just
are
so
you
you
doing?
know.
Yeah, we
So,
we're back after a little bit of a hiatus.
yeah, we took a 2 week break because news is slow after the Summer Games Fest E3 timeframe thing.
Yep.
Yeah, we were going to go live, but there really wasn't much news to go off after. There's been a bunch of like small, what do they call it? Like directs, like they did the Nintendo Direct this week,
Yeah.
and the likes of that, but just not a whole lot of news to really work off of. Nothing that's particularly interesting. I think the next big one's going to be like whatever Sony decides to do uh, in the next couple of weeks, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll probably get the slow trickle of things like we did today. Hopefully not in the same vein over the next couple weeks, but
Yes.
we've had our big everybody threw out their big summer announcements, and now we're in a lull.
Not
So,
everybody. Sony didn't.
well, that's fair. But
Yeah.
as you said, like we wouldn't expect that to come in the next like couple weeks or anything, right?
I'd expect something to be in the next couple of weeks, like another state of play, probably for God of War, because that's
Yeah.
still expected this year.
Yeah, I mean, well, Sony did have a few titles that were sort of brought up at that period, right? There was the Uncharted
They
remake,
did their
not Uncharted,
like they
Last of Us.
preceded Summer Games Fest by like, yeah, I guess like a week, something like that, with their own like, hey, we've still got stuff. But then there was at the Summer Games Fest specifically they had Naughty Dog go on and
Right.
talk.
Yes, right. That's what I'm sort of referring to
Okay.
there is that yeah, they had that. There was also someone I was watching like a video after this is another basically YouTube reviewer who had done a summary of all the events for the game announcements, and
Yeah.
they mentioned that like God of War was shown. I'm assuming it looked everything in their video that they showed during when they were talking about it looked the same from the previous trailer. So it may have just been a reminder. God of War Ragnarok is coming. So
I,
you know,
there's been a lot. I mean, this is like other people who do this sort of thing that we're doing have talked about it in speculation for
yeah.
like a month, being like, now's the week that God of War is going to be talked about, and we're going to get a release date, and it still hasn't happened. So,
Hey,
um,
you say that once every week, and 1 week you will be right.
yeah, it's like broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, nailed it. It's
Yeah,
you're the Lego movie with Batman.
yeah. Anyways, so yeah,
Good times.
uh, just so people are aware, if this is the first time watching,
Yeah.
and I can see specifically that no one is watching right now, that usually when we do this Sonic Boom Live, what we cover is game industry news from a game industry perspective. It's not the flashy like look at this new game, even though sometimes we do talk about that. It's more about talking about the most relevant news about the game industry and what it might mean for the industry as a whole. With this week, we have some unfortunate news about some pretty big layoffs, and we also have some talk about a new law that was passed by the province of Quebec to it further enforce French usage, which I don't necessarily blame them on, but it sometimes gets on the verge of draconian and or xenophobic. But either way, it's going to impact a lot of the major studios that are stationed within Quebec or more specifically Montreal. So we'll be talking about those. If you're following along, you can catch us on Twitch and YouTube. You're probably watching us on one of these, but if you're on YouTube, it's youtube.com/Sonic SonicBloomTV. Same thing for Twitch, except it's twitch.tv/SonicBloomTV. You can catch us on either one. All of our past videos are on YouTube and can be seen there as well. So if you like what we're doing, if you enjoy this content, if you want to hear more from us, comment, like, subscribe, that sort of thing really helps us out. And supposedly it helps the algorithms. So, anyways, Eric,
Yeah.
let's jump into the first topic.
Okay, let's do it. So, up first, Unity lays off a couple hundred employees. For those who don't know, Unity is one of the two major, largest game engines that are used by game developers to create the games that you play. Um, the other one being, of course, Unreal, which is made by Epic, who make Fortnite. So if you've played Fortnite, you've played an Unreal game. For Unity, they tend towards games made with Unity tend towards mobile and sort of indie titles, due to the enhanced approachability and the fact that it's free to start playing with. Although now Unreal Engine is as well.
Yeah, I think it's actually more the asset store that really helps people get a boost to get something.
And the fact that there's actually a couple. Unreal is a really, really heavy engine. It like takes a beefy machine to work with. It's way more optimized for Windows than Mac, and then Unity just works basically equally well in what Mac and PC. There's a whole lot of reasons for this. Regardless, these are the two main engines, and Unity, the company, just had to lay off somewhere north of 200 or so people.
Yeah.
And this is sort of breaking news as of there was sort of a rumor yesterday of this, and it's since been confirmed. Unity has come out and explained that they are laying people off, and that they are working on helping as many people as they can transition. And a lot of what that means is, first of all, they're offering everybody 1 month of pay regardless. You just now that you're laid off, you have 1 month of just your salary as it exists. Additionally, they are trying to. According to Unity, their HR team is helping those affected by the layoffs try to find, effectively apply for positions in other areas of the company. So it sounds like this is Unity sort of taking a stab at optimizing the structure of their company, and instead of just doing a reorg or a shuffle of seats, they just sort of like said, okay, we're gonna just hack off those entire teams or groups of people, and then ask them to reapply, and then if they fit, then they fit. Justin, do you have any more detail to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, there's some historical information that's worth knowing. The base of which is like CEO of Unity. He came in 2014. His name is John Riccatello, which you might know from EA. He was the CEO at EA for a long period of time. His yearly compensation right now is about $22 million. But there's a couple things that happened in the past that are worth bringing up because it kind of tells the story of what's happening with Unity. So they IPO'd, I believe it was... Oh, I don't have the specific year. They IPO'd a couple of years ago, so they became a publicly traded company. And during that time, they were reported to have 3,300 employees available to them. It also meant that the value of the company and the cash that they have at hand, in some part, is due to the trading value of the company. As of December 2021, or as of their IPO, they reported 3,300. As of 2021, this past December, they reported about 5,200 employees. So some significant growth, and they, as a company, I don't think they've really had much of a period of contraction at all since 2014, at least, if not before that. They've been in like a kind of constant state of growing as the indie game developer base kind of grew around both the immersion of Apple becoming, like the mobile platforms becoming a capable gaming platform, and things like the PlayStation 4 and Switch, making it very easy to self-publish. So these are things that helped boost Unity as a company, because they had constant growth and constant users of their engine. But just like Unreal, they also kind of branched off from there, because I think there's only a limited amount of growth that they can have. So they both Unreal and Unity started approaching the film industry as well as one of their major customers. Um, Vehicle visualizations, so like every new car has some sort of crazy dashboard and the
Yeah.
lights, all these things, and on top of that, their websites too. Like they'll do like 3D renders and visuals of their cars. These are things that are used by Unity and or these use Unity and Unreal to make it happen.
They're also big in architecture and
Yes.
construction for doing things like sort of VR tours. Being able to see a space and feel it in VR is very different from just looking at images. So they've been doing a lot of that type of visualization work, and it may be developed in VR, but it would be exported with one of those 3D look around view videos that are supported on sites like YouTube and other video
Yeah.
hosting platforms. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of use case for the engine outside of games, but I think it maybe I think it's fair to say that their current major market is game developers still.
Yeah, it's hard to say at this point because I know like their major the biggest areas of growth for them
Yes,
and revenue are moving towards the um,
bigger corporate
commercial and
companies.
industrial application,
Yeah,
specifically motor vehicle and film and entertainment.
yeah,
Um, and there was a push there too, which I guess is the next point, which is in the past
yeah,
year or so, they've made two major acquisitions.
yeah.
Weta Digital, they bought for $1.62 billion. Who is Weta?
Weta is the company, the special effects company for in the film industry that was behind. Actually, excuse me, Peter Jackson, I believe, started the
Started it, yeah.
company to make the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
That was where they made a name for themselves. It was sort of like Peter Jackson's version of no, ILM,
Yeah.
Industrial Light and Magic.
That's a fair comparison there.
Yeah, and they developed their own special software and pipelines for creating these mass simulations. And this is, I think, Unity acquired them presumably to integrate the technology and take their lean on their understanding of the film industry and what it means to create film and to produce special effects for film and integrate that into their pipeline. They're combating Unreal in that space, and Unreal has been putting a lot of effort into making, Epic, who make Unreal, have been putting a lot of effort into making tools for that. So they have that like 3D screen that's just this wraparound screen, and then you film in there with Unreal generated visuals in the background, which was used in what great Disney Plus show, Justin?
Mandalorian for
Yeah,
one.
that's the one I was thinking of. Yeah, but there are
But
more.
they're using it in beyond Disney Plus shows. They used it
Yeah,
for Thor: Love and Thunder as well, and
I wasn't aware of
yeah,
that.
yep. So yeah, it's used. I don't remember what they call it. I think they call it like the volume or something, but it's like a volumetric space
Oh yeah,
where visuals can be rendered all around you. Usually it's not final visuals, but you have basically a functional animatic that can then be finished. Um,
one of
and
the
and the lighting I think maintains consistency, so you have less pressure to create post process or post work to correct the lighting on film stock.
Yeah, the big reason that's a huge win for them there is, imagine you're doing things in front of a green screen. The green light from the screen is going to be coloring or affecting the color of the costumes and the skin tones of the actors. Everything on screen. That stuff is all going to need to be adjusted and corrected for in post when you're editing the film together and adding in all the special effects. With this volumetric thing, one of the major benefits they were touting was that because it's 360, you have the color of the sun, let's say, is being projected from that space. And even if the camera is in the same like location looking at you, the light color quality is still affecting you and is coloring the the costumes and the skin tones the way that you would expect in reality. So there's a lot of benefit to that approach. And as Justin said, it does indeed make it easier to go back and adjust the background because you effectively know where all the pixels are anyway.
Yeah.
If you really needed to do that. So.
And it's big business for Unreal, and Unity wants it to be big business for them as well. So buying Weta was there to like build the workflows in the pipeline so that other films could use it, because Weta tends to be involved in a lot of movies. Like they tend to be on every single Marvel film that's produced. They tend to do some amount of visual effects because there's always something that they specialize in, be it like crowd simulations, water effects, something like that. So a lot of people go to Weta for this type of thing. Now Unity owns that, and Unity's part of that. And Unity was a strategic acquisition, not officially, but certainly it looks this way, to help them get a foothold where Unreal's been succeeding with the film industry.
Yeah.
The other thing they bought is Parsec, which I'm less familiar with, but Parsec, as I understand it, is a back-end infrastructure for video streaming, game video streaming.
Yes.
So it would be all made part of a probably Unity-based platform for games to integrate with, to make it easier for games to integrate technologies that help add value to it without having to go to third-party sources for that.
Yep. But the point of bringing this stuff up is that they've spent roughly $2 billion in the past year or so on these acquisitions and are now going through layoffs, which, one of the factors we do have to keep in mind here is that money is becoming harder and harder to come by, especially for large companies that look for large loans. With inflation in the U.S. and actually much of the world happening right now, and what's it called?
I don't know.
The downturn in the markets,
like
the global economy the economic downturn, effectively, and by that I mean the stock markets.
And I think especially with Unity, I think they're down 8 cents per share from where they would be. That means that they have less effective capital to work with. Right. And if you compare it to like the beginning of this year to now, this can have a huge impact on their ability to spend.
Right. And so, with that in mind, it's hard. We don't have the insider's knowledge or view to be able to say like, oh, here's what Unity's bank account looked like before they made those purchases, and it looked great, and all signs pointed to like, keep it going. We're making money hand over fist. It's going to be great. Or we have the expectation that this is going to happen. Then the markets crash or go, start turning downwards a bunch, and inflation starts turning upwards a bunch. What is the state of Unity's bank account looking like right now? We can't say. We have no idea. But
yeah,
presumably this is a slimming down measure that they're taking in order to sort of optimize to get through this next phase of market downturn. And because maybe they just can't, with their what's it called? Roadmap. It may be a thing where they're like, well, certain of these things that made sense 6 months ago now make no sense because the customers that we're interested in selling to are cutting back and are not going to be interested in, the next 6 months when this would be done. So we're going to cut those programs and pull back on our development efforts there and focus more on these other things, So there's a lot that is going on, especially with the company, as we have pointed out, that has its hands in so many different markets as they do right now. With architecture and automotive and construction and games, like all tiers of games, mobile, console, PC, AR, VR, all that stuff. So it's rough, and I imagine that this is my personal guess, but that the markets had a lot.
Yeah, I think that's the obvious thing, right? Like, is that the market is, I mean, there's shockwaves running through the market. I think people at the end of 2020 and after like the sort of shake from COVID, were like, oh, we came out of that. That's fine. But it's like before the dominoes fell, it seemed like it was going to be fine. And I think spending maintained, especially as it was cheap and the inflation hadn't really gone up during that time. But especially now, like you'll hear a concept which is like cheap money versus expensive money. Money pre-pandemic was cheap, right? Really low interest rates. It was better to use your money as a kind of a liquid asset than it was to try to stock it in the bank, because the value of the money was so inexpensive to maintain like that. So you could put it into things that you thought were good investments, and especially during COVID, we found out a lot of companies had over leveraged themselves. They'd basically take out more money and put it in a bunch of different investments, thinking the market was going to be fine. But once it contracted a little bit, and especially with inflation going up, that meant the money became more expensive. And suddenly, if you have your fingers in a bunch of different things and they're not giving you returns, you found yourself over leveraged. You have more money out. That money you owe payback on in some form. And if it's in places that are not going to be paying back, suddenly it becomes very costly to be doing that. I can't say that's specifically what happened to Unity per se, but it wouldn't be a surprise by any means for companies to be over leveraged or more over leveraged than they would have been if we didn't have historically low interest rates for 10 years.
Artificially historically low. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Longer than 10 years, I guess, right? Like,
yeah. It's been that way for quite a while.
Since 08, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's not a surprise. There is a measure of companies need to start becoming more lean in this type of economic situation. Spending's kind of tighten up across both consumer and enterprise, commercial
spaces. Yeah.
So it's a belt measuring move that is probably much needed after rapid growth, and basically the stock market's going to become less speculative. So you're probably also seeing a course correction in the stock market where the stock value of things is more reflective of the actual value opposed to the speculative value of the value of a company. And so if this year's report shows that Unity is over leveraged and the growth in their expected growth areas are not producing the same thing, then they will see a permanent retraction in their stock value, and I think they may be anticipating that. And this is not going to be exclusive to them. It's going to be Tesla, Apple, and a bunch of other companies that have historically been overvalued, especially companies like Apple may be an outlier, whereas Apple has revenues to back it up to some degree.
Yeah.
Whereas Tesla doesn't.
Right.
So that the value of Tesla, like eventually it's going to correct to what it's closer to what its actual market value is. So bumpy ride ahead.
So it goes. I mean, at some point, even with huge economic downturns, it may be the case that like the stock is going to be worth the money that people are willing to pay for it or are able to pay for it is actually worth less than its fair market value.
Yeah, there's that too, right? As people bail from the market to try to save some money. And especially with like general investors, like not like large whales
funds
within the market, and that sort of thing. You may be finding that with like a bunch of consumers leaving the market and taking their money out, that you're going to see an artificial, not an artificial retraction. It's retraction, that's true, but it's not relative to how investors are handling it. It's relative to how like individuals are treating their money that is sitting in stock market accounts. But free advice to anybody who finds themselves investing money: don't take out when the market's low. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, leave it in. Don't. Yeah.
If anything, if you've got extra cash hanging around, put money in the markets.
Yeah, because it's buy cheap, right? Like when the value goes down, that's the time to buy. Now, don't put all your money in there if you can't afford it. Don't beggar yourself to do this. But yeah, it's taking out money because you're reacting to, oh my God, I've lost 80% of my money. Like, I better take it out now so I don't lose more. Totally the wrong way to look at it. Because as we've seen in the past, like even the 2008 stock market crash, we got way, way better than that, 3, 4, or 5 years after. So if you can wait that long, just let it sit. The market will come back. This has happened before. It will happen again. We are also not financial advisors.
But I'm almost certain that's what a financial advisor would tell you.
Oh, almost. Yeah, almost, I think I've been told that by my financial advisor. So yeah.
The only thing that like could have happened at this point, and it's way too late, is that as the bull run was kind of dying out, you should have had an investor, an advisor that's just like, okay, we're going to put money into, commodity items and bonds, which will have a better staying power through a market downturn. And then as the market starts recharging again, you then switch it back out and put it back into a down market where you will then stand to gain. This is how wealthy people always end up more wealthy after stock market crash, and not wealthy people end up getting more poor. And the divide, and our socioeconomic divide, tends to get wedged further and further apart. So enough about politics. Talking about economics and in the state of companies, who's the next company for layoffs?
Well, before we get to that, I was curious if you had thoughts about what Unity's layoffs might mean for like games. Is that something that's going to immediately, we're going to see like, oh no, this is going to be a change for the game stuff? Or do you have thoughts?
I mean, so again, not being from Unity, not knowing exactly where they're at, a change like this means that they're going to be course correcting what their overall business goals are and what is most important to them as a business. I don't know what is contracting the most right now. My assumption is, especially during an economic downturn, entertainment is never the thing to get hurt. Entertainment tends to end up growing during periods like this because people stop spending money and start turning towards movies and TV and video games to make themselves feel better. So I do not think the game industry is going to see a strong response to it. But or for that matter, film and video. But you might see that hobbyists are pulling out of the market, or pulling out of like actively developing in Unity. It might mean more tightening belts around how they make money or how people spend money in the asset store, which may cause them to go, actually, I know our primary focus is the game industry. Initially, at least, we had a game engine, but we're less interested in continuing to develop out this game engine, and we're beginning to get more interested in new markets and future applications. So entertainment, film, video, we know that's a big market that's going to continue to grow. We want to put more of our resources into that. So that means especially if you're game dev, you may see some stagnation out of Unity in terms of innovating in this space.
Yeah, they've not. It's still like super early. Like literally, developer forums are talking as we speak about this topic, and seeing who is affected by this. What we've heard is that a lot of engineers are affected by this, and they are like, the one area that we've been told is AI, which could mean in Unity sort of one of two things. One is pathfinding and just sort of like navigation meshes, which is sort of this concept of how do you tell a character to look for something way over here and have it navigate through that, right? AI has to handle that. So that's one option. I doubt it's that. I think it's more the AI aspect, which is machine learning and artificial intelligence, where Unity has been trying to integrate different neural networking models into the engine so that they can have things like automated AI development where you train an AI to play your game, and then that is what the player will play against. Once the model's been generated, it runs and then it plays. Or you can use that to test your level designs and whatever.
Right. Like you see this actually in particular in like the new Halo game.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The Halo bots that you play like human beings because they're trained on an AI, or it's an AI that's been trained in a machine learning setup.
So like that could be one of the areas we again, it's super early. We're not sure, but it's I think if we're going to see my read of it is that if we're going to see something, it'll probably come sometime. Excuse me. In like we wouldn't really see the effect for, I don't know, probably 6 months because of the release schedule of the engine and especially, and I say we, it's the game developers. Players, people who aren't in the industry would probably not see any effects of this for like 1 to 3 years. So, it's hard to say. It's also not like Unity is just shutting down or dramatically reducing. There's 4% of their staff, which, while sizable, doesn't mean that they're like tanking the company.
No, I mean, I think it's indicative of a restructuring and reprioritizing of where they think the development needs to be focused on. And we'll probably see more of this over the next year as they kind of switch gears and refocus what is most important. The thing I don't know, the thing I won't know about unless I'm a specific investor in Unity, is where exactly are their growth areas. And I can say for certain, and as they've talked before, is that their growth areas are in this are in the commercial space. Like they want to move into film and video production, and they also highlight like car manufacturing visualization as areas, because those areas also have seen significant growth during the past 10 years, where car prices have inflated a lot. And those sort of things where these industries have a lot of money to throw at problems, and Unity and Unreal have been benefactors of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next item,
which I think is actually a bit more indicative of impact on what gamers can actually expect to see as a result of this sort of contracting economy
market. Yeah. So number 2, the second in the layoffs fun, let's say, of this week's news, sarcastic fun, is Niantic, makers of Pokemon Go and other games that are AR based, including like a Pikmin game, a Harry Potter game, and a Catan game. But none of those have hit the same sort of level of popularity as the Pokemon game.
Yeah.
They are laying off between 85 and 90 employees, which for them represents around, 8%, I believe, of their studio. I'm gonna double check.
Yeah, actually didn't have a specific percentage that I thought.
Yeah, I think it did say the percent. I'm just quickly. No, it didn't say it. Maybe about 8% to focus on key priorities. Was their goal. Now, what did this mean for sort of, I guess, them and the products that they've been working on?
Well, I mean, specifically, a bit longer is Pokemon Go came out in what, 2015? 2016?
16.
2016.
Yep, 2016. I'm pretty sure 2016.
And it's an explosive success. I mean, even to this day, I think it's still very successful, or it pulls in nearly $100 million per month, which is crazy. It's wildly successful. But for them, they've been trying to repeat success to justify the growth of their studio. And by doing that, they've tried to create other licensed titles, with the few that you mentioned there, Catan, Pikmin, etc. But they have not been able to reproduce the success that they've found with Pokemon Go. So we know that they're working on more titles, but they have basically stated that, okay, 4 titles are getting cut. The growth of our studio is not justified at this point, and 8% of their studio got the axe as part of this whole restructuring, which is very clearly an indication that their finances are not healthy. And I think their CEO said as much.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting here is that there's sort of a, this is the editorial part of the column, right? Like the news items point out, they make a big point of the fact that Pokemon Go by itself is pulling in something like $1 billion a year.
Yes.
And it's like, how does that not fund the 85 to 90 people? like,
right.
Like that, how are you able to justify the fact that that you're not selling that? And what we don't know is in the agreement of being able to use the property of Pokemon, how much of that
Nintendo?
Exactly. How much of that revenue? Not even Nintendo. Nintendo, yes, is a major stakeholder of the Pokemon company, but also the Pokemon company. Not the money that Nintendo makes on Pokemon is only part of the pie because they're I think majority stakeholder in the Pokemon company, but it is still a separate entity from Nintendo.
Right.
So like, Nintendo and the Pokemon company get probably a pretty significant chunk of that $1 billion. And I'm not sure that we know what that split looks like. And it's unclear as to whether that the $1 billion value that everybody loves to report is the gross revenue or the net revenue, is whether it's the total money that was made by the application across the app stores that Niantic saw come in, or after that amount minus how much money they had to pay out to other people for the right to use Pokemon and the costs involved for, I don't know, server time and all that other stuff, right? Like when you subtract all that money away, how much money did Niantic actually pull in out of that 1 billion? Hopefully it's enough to pay employees, but we can't say as to whether that is enough to pay for all their infrastructure and all of the projects they're trying to develop across all their teams, right?
Right. Yeah, and especially with licensed content like this, like you never see the same amount of money coming back at you if it was like a wholly owned IP.
Right.
But they can't find success in wholly owned IPs.
It sounds like they're struggling even with other sort of licensed IPs that they're not able to replicate that success.
Right. And we know from this press statement that like one of the IPs or one of the titles that they were working on that got cut is a Transformers IP. It's just like there's just not enough power behind it. I guess. I mean, like it's unclear because they haven't released the game, but they axed it. Probably not the least of which was the amount of costs going into develop a game like that. And I think this actually speaks to like a bigger issue, which is like making games is not a sure way of making money.
No, not at all.
No, I mean it like games of all things are a gamble. This is why like when we saw like the last like fallout of investment falling away from games companies when like MMOs were we weren't able to replicate MMOs. Like we had a handful of games that were big MMOs, but investment was falling away from the game industry, and it wasn't until like PUBG and games like that, which had these like sort of
Fortnite,
where you see like a single game being able to make billions of dollars a year, and Pokemon Go being one of them, that we saw money being thrown back at games as a way for investors to make money.
Taking risk doing so,
Right. But it's lightning in a bottle, right? Like we see this over and over again where very few companies have been able to take initial success and parlay that into ongoing success. Call of Duty is one of them, but Call of Duty even today we're seeing declining sales year over year and not able to maintain the sort of profitability on that one title that Activision used to.
Right, which is also a huge problem for Activision because those games are very, very expensive to make.
Right.
And even though they're like absolutely gorgeous, they use all the latest rendering technology, which by the way is very, very expensive to make. And to build, it takes lots of research and brain power and many, many hours to get right. And when the companies when those games start to not do as well over the years, you start to see people scrambling to find other ways to make money. I mean, Blizzard re-released World of Warcraft because their current, I assume, this could be wrong, but again, this is me reading tea leaves here. They they were themselves sort of losing players over time and had this like falling thing, and they reinvigorated many of their old original players by releasing World of Warcraft Classic. I know a number of my friends went back and played it again to enjoy that original content and enjoy the early level or the early game where, you know, it wasn't optimized for everybody getting to end game immediately. Yeah. And, you know, so we're seeing potentially that sort of same thing happening in the Call of Duty space, where people are just sort of like kind of tired of the deathmatch style and are more interested in things like, you know, the currently more interested in things like battle royale style.
You're right.
You know, and games fully optimized for that, like PUBG and Fortnite. And, you know, certainly there's going to be something else that's going to come along and sort of take that as the steam in those games sort of like wears out and cools down. You know, it's we actually saw this with music games, which is near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah.
As Harmonix and Activision, I think, right?
Yeah.
With
Guitar
released. Hero. They tried to turn Guitar Hero and Rock Band basically into yearly release titles, and they oversaturated the market, and people stopped wanting to buy plastic instruments, and sort of the sales tanked on those games. And that's why it went between Rock Band 3 and 4. There were many years in between. It's because they just couldn't, you know, like
they still didn't recapture it. Even Guitar or Rock Band 4 just failed to capture the imagination that like the novel experience of rocking out caught in the first. And I think this is the same sort of thing with Pokemon Go. It's like it's hard to recapture the idea of like AR gaming because it and like the Wii, it's like once you experience it, you're like, oh, this is cool. And I jumped on initially to play it and see what it's like, and the game caught my attention, and I kept on playing it. But once you realize that like the AR aspect of it really didn't have long legs, like people were no longer showing up to just check it out, and now it's, you know, it's kind of flatlined, and Niantic has to actually innovate and take huge gambles to find out what else will stick. And like we were saying with Unity, it's money is not cheap anymore. For them to take money and reinvest it heavily into something else when the, you know, interest rate on money is much higher, they have to retract. Companies at this point will become less risky with how it is that they're going to use their money and instead put it in safer investments. And this is likely what we're seeing from Niantic as well. Yeah.
I mean, it's games are inherently and always risky. They are people's investors' ability to stomach risk and take the risky choice of saying, let's make a new game, let's go into this new thing, instead of trying to, you know, do a little bit to entice the people already playing and paying for a game to pay a little bit more. That's a lower risk thing than to say, let's spend, you know, $250 million building this new game where we don't know if people are going to want to play it. You know, it could be that we put it out there and people yawn. Right. Now we've spent all that money, and in a down market, like that money is extra valuable now, and we've just lost it. Great.
Plus, right now, Niantic's not publicly traded. I don't know when their last investment round is, but if they say, hey, we need to, you know, pull in another $100 million from outside investors are going to be like, how is that you can justify another $100 million of our money and give us a return? Then they face the risk of having a lower valuation on the next investment round. If that happens, you start seeing a heavy contraction of the company to get back to a point where they can actually sustain the growth. And as a gaming company, it's just almost impossible to do that.
Yep. Very, very difficult. So unfortunate news for Niantic there. Actually, any thoughts on, before we close this one out, any thoughts on why Niantic has been struggling with the titles since Pokemon Go to like find that lightning again?
I think it's just innovation, like novelty. Novelty got people to play Pokemon Go. That novelty wore off, and now there's no more novelty in like what a cell phone can do, because we know what cell phones do. All the promise
Yeah.
of like motion gaming or being able to take something around and use GPS, like they've tried those things before. It's not that great. Uh,
Yeah, the
because
amount of time and effort to get a reward or a payback is, substantial
yeah. So now
and
innovation
costly.
in cell phone apps and gaming is just not there. And now it's the next thing. And the next thing is unlikely to be cell phones entirely and more likely to be metaverse and VR gaming.
Yeah, I would also submit on top of that that like let's look at the IPs that they've been dealing with. Transformers, it's the new one, the heavy metal game that got
Yeah.
canceled as part of this. Harry Potter and Catan as games outside of Pokemon. Um, Pokemon, a game where you are ostensibly a trainer who goes out into the world and travels the world capturing item or little monsters in different locations, pairs perfectly with the concept of an AR game where you go outside and do things while you travel around.
Yeah.
Like walking around, oh look, you found something, you walked 20 feet down the road and found something new, congratulations. Like this makes sense in that world. It makes less sense. Like I remember hearing about Harry Potter and being like, how are they going to do? What are they going to do with that? Like,
Right.
how are they going to make that a thing? Pikmin sort of makes sense. I can see the Pikmin thing, but Pikmin as a Nintendo license has always struck me as being somewhat of a niche.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very small and like a certain group of player really likes it, but it's never been one of Nintendo's absolute top sellers. And so like, my expectations for that game's success, the bar was set a lot lower than say Pikmin or something like Harry Potter. And I actually don't know what they did with the AR integration for Harry Potter or Catan, Catan for that matter. And Catan, for those who don't know, short for Settlers of Catan, which is a board game. I just don't see how they would have, what would they have done with that? I don't know. I haven't played them, but none of those IPs speak as directly applicable to the AR experience while walking around as Pokemon. Like that, you are effectively in the real world playing yourself as a Pokemon trainer, which is a clear win for that IP.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if they'll capture it again. I think a big concern of mine now is that as we've seen in this past like console generation,
Yeah.
where this coming console generation, there's consolidation happening, some pretty massive consolidation.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
yes, huge.
and we've seen this before in the game industry, was just before like the independent game wave happened.
Yeah, this is 2007-8 era.
Yeah. We saw like a massive contraction in the game industry, and we lost a bunch of great companies that had made some pretty amazing titles, and their founders and whatever else just bailed and went to other companies or just
Well,
retired.
what's fun is there's two. I was thinking like, yeah, well, the reason for that is because of the dramatically more expensive cost to make games that, ran on the PS3 and the Xbox 360, which is the consoles that were around during that era.
Well, and a decline in the PC gaming space as well.
There was that.
Yeah.
But there was also 2008's market crash.
Yes.
Like that downturn of the market was also huge and had a massive outsized impact. I mean, I remember actually, now that you mention it, with the rise of indie games, a lot of the game studios that shut down, part of the rise of that indie game wave were all the now jobless like indies or like previous industry veterans going, well, I still want to make games, but no one's hiring, so I guess I'll just make my own game. And finding tools like Unity and to an extent Unreal at that time, which was less approachable. And some people just made their own engine anyway. But
I mean, my concern is that a lot of large mobile game developers are going to be affected by this.
yes,
They may have one or two staple games that make them money, but outside of that,
yeah,
if they're unable to make the same amount of money, there will be layoffs and there will be contraction of those developers, and likewise happens with consolidated publishers, right? Like Activision owning like whatever it was, like 80% of publishers or like game developers at that time in 2008, them going under Activision and a handful of others to become these like massive companies. Like they've enjoyed continuous growth after that period, with a couple major things happening in the game industry. And at this point, it's like, will they actually be able to sustain that? Will people be willing to spend $70 per game at the same rate they've been spending $70 per game to, like, in the past year? I can safely assume that's no, but is it as significant? Like, is it going to cause significant ripples to the game industry? It's like, not for individual companies, unlikely, but certainly for larger publishers like Activision, which have like 10, 15 major studios. And if they're all seeing a pullback, that means that, like, they might see a 5 to 10%, decrease in revenues in a given year. And if that happens and they're not on board with, like, the latest changes in the game industry that are growing areas, you'll see layoffs across, Activision, or they'll completely shutter studios like we saw in 2008.
Yeah, which, oh man, some of those were really sad. You'd see them go down, and you're like, why that one?
Yeah, like
They made some of my favorite. What's that?
Interplay, or
Yeah.
what did they end up getting called later? The guys that made, like, MDK.
Oh yeah,
Gem.
Man, I'm blanking on their
Shiny
names.
was what they were called at one point. Shiny, Interplay. They had a funny name afterwards.
Uh,
I think they end up getting, like, consumed into Sumo Digital.
no, they merged with the Collective in October
There's
2007.
the Collective, yeah.
They became Double Helix.
Double Helix, and they closed eventually.
Yep, and they were integrated.
Into Sumo.
They were acquired by Amazon and integrated in February 2014. And Amazon Game Studios, I guess, is still around. Oh no, wait, what? Founded in 2000. Wait a minute.
Ish. They're still around. Ish.
Yeah. Amazon Game Studios, Orange County, specifically. They developed a title called New World, which was released in September 2021. I guess there's still. Yeah, me neither. So I don't know.
Oh no, I remember that. Yes, I remember that title. That was like the big Amazon game that did not do well, and Amazon's like, I don't know if we should be in this gaming space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an MMO PC game. I guess, New World Arenas. Is it still out?
Yeah.
40, it's still, their website's still up, and it says it's 40% off on Steam. So,
well,
I don't know.
Anyways,
I
guess the bottom line is, we can't quite know what's going to happen, but if like 2008 is any indication of what will happen in the game industry, there will be a large contraction, and there will be a burgeoning new space of like massive growth, both for like independent developers and like veteran developers. But I don't know where it's like. My guess is the metaverse. That's going to be the next space in VR, like a more successful VR AR platform. Which,
now that the headsets have come a long way in technology,
they've come down in price as well. They don't require like a giant PC to be tethered to them, and I think Facebook has shown that there is an interest here. But I feel like the application still has not fully matured to be like a mass market success yet.
No.
So
no, and that's even just saying the AR VR wing of the metaverse, whatever that becomes, because there's also
we're just straight up AR VR gaming.
Yeah, there's also just, AR or the metaverse world, as in you're staring at it on your monitor.
Yeah.
For your laptop,
Like we used to do with Second Life.
Yep. Or Fortnite, as Epic is trying to move their game into a sort of a metaverse space.
Yep.
All right.
Last topic.
Yep. So, You want to do it?
Yeah, sure. I'll introduce it. The last bit is loosely related to what we've just been talking about, but
Jobs.
Quebec, which famously holds the city of Montreal and Quebec City, is pushing some new requirements that were passed by law in their province. That's gonna have an impact on the gaming industry. some of the background information is that it's a francophone territory. It was originally going way back. It was settled by the French, and then it was united as under British rule, and then now independent for I don't know how long at this point, but it's a weird situation because it's a French territory in an English speaking country that is was formerly under British rule, and part of their huge chip on the shoulder is that they want to maintain their French speaking heritage, which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that inherently. But they've taken a lot of measures over the past, 20, 30 years to try to make sure that Quebec, within an English-speaking country, maintains its Frenchness, at least its French Canadianness. So
Yeah.
what kind of impact? Like, why are we bringing this up, Eric?
So we're bringing this up because I want to say it was the city of Montreal. It might have been Canada overall. It may have been Quebec, the province.
Yeah.
Province. Yeah, jeez. And it might have actually. It may have been like literally an initiative of Montreal, the city.
I think it's both Montreal and Quebec initiating this. Yeah.
This thing, yeah. So they were offering for a number of years large tax incentives to companies that were willing to relocate or startups interested in starting up in the games industry, games and related adjacent industries in Montreal/Quebec, the province. So that attracted a lot of larger studios. The names that exist in that area right now are Ubisoft, Square Enix, Eidos, Autodesk, Beenox, Gameloft, Unity, BioWare, Warner Brothers, and a whole bunch of others that took those tax incentives to relocate there. And now with this law coming into place, it severely restricts the breadth of talent from which they can draw going forward. The new law will apply to effectively new employees. There are some oddities about how the law is, as proposed, is structured in terms of like there are those who are grandfathered in who don't have to adhere to this requirement for business or meetings. Business meetings to be conducted in French,
which might have actually been a legacy requirement that was just not specifically enforced.
Yeah, from the original outstanding
Yeah.
law that was set up. Yeah, it's true. But they're actually talking about strictly enforcing it now, which for the companies that moved into Quebec and particularly Montreal, this is sort of a little bit of a my read of it personally is that it's a bit of a slap in the face because it's like, well, come here. It's great. We're not going to enforce this thing. Don't worry about it. And, oh, now we're setting up a rule that means you can't hire people if they don't know French.
Yeah.
Effectively, going forward, which the French speaking world is much, much, much smaller than the English speaking world. English speakers aren't just like the rest of Canada and the United States and other, in England. It is much of the world, much of Europe at least speaks English as one of their languages. And Asia.
I mean, most business done through Europe at this point is done within English as like the common language.
Yep.
Unfortunately forgoing things
lingua
like,
franca.
Yeah, which worked really well when you were working between Africa, parts of the Americas, and at one point I think French was the largest spoken language in the world, and is not anymore. And that's in large part because also Chinese individuals who want to do business with Western companies use English as the base language as well. India, I think.
I was going to say, yeah.
India is a big one where English actually is a common language.
Yeah.
Between all the tribal, like Hindi is the official language, but English is like an actual a bridging language across different dialects and other languages spoken in India.
Thanks, imperialism.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we can't change it, but that's
Nope.
those are the long shadows that imperialism casts.
Yep. Yep.
There's also another detailed part of the law. So with people, being hired to these companies, going like, nah, you don't really need to know French. We may conduct business, but there's always going to be, a way to get around this, in which knowing English only, you can, operate within this company, and most people will be talking in French. The province of Quebec is now making it mandatory that all government services have to be done in French, with the exception of healthcare. Healthcare can still be done in English and also other languages, but this means that buying a house, getting loans,
Yeah.
things of this nature, like your day to day, anytime you have to interact with the government, you have to call 911, or whatever it is in Canada, 311, maybe, or maybe the 311 is
Yeah.
Information. Either way, all going to be done in French, which means that even if the company is more lenient, the city or state itself, province, it will not be.
Right. Right. And this isn't a law that says, well, maybe, I don't know. I haven't read the actual law, but the reports about the law do not suggest that this is it seems to suggest that the language of business, meetings within companies, must be conducted in French, which, if that's true, is like, I mean, I have lived and worked abroad in a foreign country, specifically Japan. And I worked in the company that I worked in, there were other English speakers like myself. We could all speak Japanese to varying levels of proficiency. And if there were Japanese people in there, we would speak Japanese, because not every Japanese person speaks English. However, when it was just us who were there, we would speak English, and there wasn't a problem. And sometimes we'd have a Japanese person who was also bilingual, and they would speak English with us. And like, this would be a thing where if they forced you to be in a situation where, like, it sort of becomes a law. The law going into the business is a little bit odd here, because imagine a world where, or a company where everyone is bilingual, but some people prefer English, or they speak way better English than they do French. Their French is not great. If that meeting is conducted in French because it has to be, when everyone would be totally fine speaking in English, then it sort of feels weird, because your business would be better speaking in English. And you're like, have to do this because the law of the land is, nope, you have to do this. I'm telling you this, as a business, this is how you have to speak with one another. Seems a bit odd.
Yeah.
And a little bit of an overstep. But, this is me coming from, freedom, America, whatever. Like, I don't live in there, but it just does seem a little bit weird to be.
I mean, I think, I think the biggest issue with Quebec, and in their push to maintain relevance of French Canadian and French speaking in Canada, is that at times it becomes xenophobic. Where they're like, no, you can't wear hijab. You have to fully expose your face. Where you start creating laws like that are like, you can't take over a territory with another culture, and or in the case where attitudes towards people who speak a different language becomes maybe outwardly aggressive, it can then become problematic for people who are living it there, and outright xenophobic. And the parties that do push this stuff use xenophobia as a way to get agreement within the people, within French speaking Quebec. I think the thing that's worse about this is that if a company is actively hiring, especially in the tech space, where your proficiencies and skills will come from all over the world, and and it's maybe unspoken, but English being the common language at this point in time, uh, to have that sort of communication, and then you get hired to a company that's in a French speaking territory within an area that speaks English as well, and an English speaking country, uh, and you're told French actually isn't required. You should be fine. And people within Montreal are really friendly and will speak English to you in most cases. And then have the state turn around on you and say, actually, French is spoken here, and you cannot operate, and you cannot take our businesses. I mean, like I live in Texas, where large portions of the state are primarily Spanish speaking. If the state turned around and said, we're an English speaking state, and you cannot conduct school or businesses or anything
Don't say
else.
it, Justin. Stop saying it, because you know that
Yeah,
Abbott is going to be listening to this, and he's going to do it.
I'm willing it into existence. But I mean, that's been a talking point for a long time within certain political groups. So that sort of is a betrayal of the people who live there, and at a minimum, you have this kind of like duality of what they're asking. Like, hey, we're going to give you tax incentives to come here. They work for Ubisoft. Ubisoft is a French company, but it works for Square Enix, which is a Japanese company, putting their offices in the Americas, and they deciding to go into Montreal specifically to get tax breaks and to get talent from North America to help them build games. Now they're going back on that and saying, I know we want you to build your company here, but we want it to be specifically French speaking, and we want the people you're hiring to know French as a primary language, or at least a secondary language, so they can do business with us and they can get our services, and they won't have troubles living in our territories. When you get to that point, you're significantly narrowing your pool of people that you can actually work with. And then, what's the incentive for a company to put a headquarters in a place where they're only able to get talent very specifically from either France, North Africa, or like a handful of Caribbean islands and Quebec specifically.
Neat.
Yeah. It's like shooting themselves in the foot. It's weird.
Yeah. So I guess that sort of answers one of the questions that we have, which is this a good or a bad thing for Quebec?
I mean, what do you think?
So my opinion, nice deflection.
Yeah.
Let me put myself out there first.
Yeah.
I think it's not a great thing, because they're going to effectively be turning away, talent. They're going to have to. Companies, they're probably going to have to like reevaluate their stance as being a company in Montreal, and the rest of Quebec for that matter, just simply because of the limitation that if they have to hire people who at least can speak French to a degree.
At least have a business understanding of it to be able to conduct business in that language.
Right. The slice of people that are potential candidates that they could hire, globally, is way slim compared to if that rule doesn't, like, what did the status quo right now, where no such law exists, or at least is enforced. They're able to hire people that have never heard of the French language, but are very, very good at what they do, and therefore will be bringing in money. And the fact that they're now moving to Montreal and bringing commerce and whatever there, we may see stuff outgoing for that. I'm also just sort of like sort of a little bit. I mean, I come from a place of privilege in this space, I think, having most
we all do, being native English speakers. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well, but also having come from most recently, like Cambridge, Massachusetts and Vermont, where all of the communication you get, at least, of course, in healthcare, but in other locations you get, bilingual or multilingual government related stuff. And they've never heard of a law in any of the places that I've lived in recently, at least, where a language was required, other than for the company, because the company itself had a limitation, right? Like we unfortunately, if you cannot speak English, that's the the language that we all speak, and we won't be able to communicate, and that's a problem.
Right.
Right. Like, sure, that makes sense. If you're like, if Montreal had a company that only spoke French and their employees could not speak English, then great. Like, let them only hire French speakers.
Right.
Like, that's their decision, though, right? Like, they can set that up as a requirement because that's what is required for communication in the company. It's, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it cuts both ways in the sense that, like, it's bad for their game companies. It's bad for their game industry because it means that they're like the companies will have to think twice about it. I mean, Eidos Montreal it is already in Square Enix. Montreal are already being sold off to other companies.
Yeah.
And so, like, those companies might reevaluate having, that company specifically within that, or closing it altogether to be in a, an area where things can be more competitive for them. Even with Montreal having, like, Miguel and some really prestigious universities there that can produce quite a lot of talent. Like, if it's English only talent or French speaking only talent, they're going to limit what they're actually able to do with the talent out there, and may consider relocating. Bad for Quebec. I don't know. I mean, those companies probably did bring in a lot of English speakers that did not know French. And as a result, like, Montreal as a city is probably becoming less and less French speaking. And that's problematic because what is it, like 60% of Canadian citizens live within those cities.
Yeah.
So it means that it will dig away at the French Canadianness of Quebec and slowly turn it into English speaking Canada, which for Quebec to try to maintain its French speaking, it'll probably work in positive ways that way, but at the cost of being xenophobic and causing people to turn away. So
yeah, it's so I guess in a related thing, what kind of changes do you think we might see in games coming from Quebec from here?
Certainly a change in the way they're probably treated. I would imagine that the companies would stay open, but in the case of, like, well, it might not be the case with Ubisoft because Ubisoft is a French-speaking company. I know they conduct business in English. I have quite a few English-speaking friends that do not know French working within Ubisoft in Montreal and conducting business there. But I think the point is that you may find that the willingness to use, say, Ubisoft Montreal as a primary developer for Assassin's Creed X may get withdrawn, and they may choose to develop that at another studio that is more flexible in what language they choose to use in the studio itself, making it more available to other talent. So you see that there's some really effective and creative teams at those places, and you may see them beginning to fracture and moving away. So creative teams that we've known and loved for some time, like the creators of Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance, assuming that they weren't sold, like half a year ago, less. Yeah, might have meant that, like, that team stuck together longer. And now we may very well see that team fracture apart, not least of which because of the sale. But this may be the final nail in the coffin for that studio to be a primary developer for any of the major titles, and instead defaulting to a more accepting and open territory that allows for English being spoken as the primary language for development.
Yeah.
Your thoughts? Feelings?
My feelings when I saw this, I will say, were I was like, "Oh, come on."
Yeah.
And mostly it was because we have friends that work in Montreal, work for those studios, and, like, if this law passes and becomes if the bill passes and becomes law, then like, it will make their lives much harder. And
I think it did pass. That's the thing.
Did it?
I don't know if it got, like, ratified.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking is the ratified.
I
I
mean,
think Bill
unfortunately,
96,
I'm not that familiar with like
their law process.
yeah, their legislative process. So does it have to get passed to some sort of upper chamber within the province to make the decision final? I know it passed at least one of those barriers to make it at least a partial law.
Hold on. It says Quebec's Bill 96 modifying the Charter of the French language receives royal assent. Key dates for when the amendments come into force.
So it sounds like it is passed. It's just a matter of
It
time
does.
for when it actually gets put into effect.
Yep. June 1st, date of assent. Yeah. So some things are already in effect.
Yep.
Some things do not come into effect until, say, September 1st of this year. But everything else should be in effect.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Some of this is June 1st, 2023. Others are June 1st, 2025.
Yeah, so I'd say if you're watching this, enjoying this, hopefully giving it a thumbs up and liking and subscribing. But more so, if you've got friends in the game industry, if you have friends that are working at these companies that have been affected by either layoffs or a new onerous requirement that is causing them to think about going elsewhere, help them out. If you've got open job positions, let them know. There's a ton of resources for that stuff online, but it's a tough thing to especially being laid off, suddenly losing your job can be real difficult. So keep an eye out for those people. Do what you can if you can help them out at all. If you've got open job positions within the game industry or adjacent industries, let them know about that because you might be able to help them out and really, keep things moving in a down economy for them, opposed to putting them in a much worse position.
Yeah.
All right. Any other final thoughts, Eric?
Oh, I think that's it. I mean, hey, man, here's my final thoughts. Fingers crossed that the market bottoms out soon and we can get back to some growth and making sweet games. All the fingers crossed. I don't think it's going to help, but
I will will it that this economy rebounds soon and the effects of COVID causing significant ripples in the economy. We return to normal, but barring significant war between aggressive countries. Anyways,
or aggressive
that Debbie Downer note.
Country. Anyway, yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this content, like I said, please like, subscribe. It does help us out. You can check all of our older content on YouTube at youtube.com/SonicBoomTV, where you can catch the rest of our stuff. And we're on every Thursday or nearly every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll catch you next week.